Welcome everyone to our Trauma Healing and Learning Series, Part 7. My name is Johan Cardenas. I am the MBK Program Specialist at Public Health Advocates. And today's topic will be about understanding the challenges for boys and young men of color as they return to school. Next slide, please. We would also like to ask you guys if you could add your name and organization in the chat box to please mute yourselves and use the Q&A feature to pose questions for our speakers or the support team. We would also like to give a huge thank you to our sponsors and support organizations. Today wouldn't be possible without them. We just want to say huge thank you. And for today's agenda, we have a lot of exciting things. We will be having a ancestor acknowledgements from Dr. Tiffany Johnson, a youth spotlight performance by Coley World, about the discussion by Andrew Avila, MBK Sacramento overview and updates by Mr. Ray Green, a panel discussion and Q&A hosted by Mr. D'Angelo Mack, helpful resources, Brother Be Well by Christina Smith, Restarting School with Equity at the Center by Tere Flores, and a youth spotlight performance by Maya Werko, as well as a survey and next steps by Dr. Christina Gallardi, and closing remarks by Mr. D'Angelo Mack. I would like to now pass it on to Dr. Tiffany Johnson for our ancestor acknowledgements.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Johan, for passing the baton. So in the spirit of truth, transparency, and reconciliation, it's important that we first start our meeting by acknowledging the indigenous peoples who have been dispossessed and displaced from their ancestral homelands and territories due to a variety of colonial and historical reasons. I also want to take the time to acknowledge all of the boys and young men of color who have lost their lives since the last time we gathered, whether due to community violence, police violence, COVID-19, or other preventable causes. They were our sons and brothers, our nephews and uncles, and in some cases, young fathers. We acknowledge their unfulfilled dreams and the potential that was not realized. If you haven't already been vaccinated, please know that this Delta variant is no joke. Youth are getting the virus, many are requiring hospitalization, and some are dying. And so vaccines combined with masking are our best chance at fighting this pandemic so that you don't have to be counted among those who we've lost next time we gather. And finally, we want to take the time to acknowledge the ancestors whose shoulders we stand on today, making room for all of our greatness. We acknowledge our mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, aunties and uncles. We acknowledge all those whose art, music, literature, and activism help open opportunities and doors for us and enrich our minds and our hearts. We stand on the shoulders of Sojourner Truth, Malcolm X, Freddie Lou Hamer, James Baldwin, and Audre Lorde. As our youth return back to school, we acknowledge the educators and activists who changed the way our people are educated, including Booker T. Washington, who founded Tuskegee University, and Thurgood Marshall, who was the lead attorney in the groundbreaking Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education, and Carter G. Woodson, who established the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. We acknowledge the Black Panther Party, who launched a free breakfast program for children right here in California, paving the way for permanent authorization of a federal breakfast program that has fed tens of millions of children, giving them the fuel that they need to learn throughout the day. We celebrate the greats we're still blessed to have walking among us, such as Alice Walker, Nikki Giovanni, and Angela Davis. We channel their fierceness, their tenacity, their boldness, and their brilliance. We have such a dynamic panel lined up for you today as we try to understand these unique challenges for boys and young men of color returning to school during this pandemic. And we know that the ancestors are with us today, and we know that they're beaming with pride at all the work that's being done. And so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to our MC, Katie.
Thank you, Dr. Tiffany. So good morning again this morning. And part of the spirit of My Brother's Keeper is youth. And we have our very first youth spotlight, Coley World, one of the many great folks we have planned for you. So Coley, if you could.
Because we like guns, yeah, and they like us too. Because we like guns, and they like us too. Because we like guns, yeah, and they like us too. 'cause we like guns and they like us too. 'Cause we like guns and they like us too. Blue lives caused kings to lay in red puddles. They said his coat was dark and that's what made him dangerous. But their reason wasn't subtle. A dark coat with a brown layer under. They said his skin made him a target. Pressed for a penalty for what? We know they won't charge it. Frequent escape from repercussion. Exemption from penalty is a sanctuary. No disciplinary. Success has been revoked as an invitation. Put kings behind bars. But we not the ones needing rehabilitation. Because guns like us, but we don't want them to. Say he don't want to face it no more. But he ain't got a choice to. Because we like guns, yeah. And they like us too. Because we like guns. And they like us too. Because we like guns, yeah. And they like us too. Because we like guns. And they like us too. So now he claps the Automat Kalashnikov, straight oblivious to the damage that it causes. He entered the war, but never studied how it started. Now his love for his people and collectivism is discarded. In the grand scheme of things, it's not his fault though. He just got caught up in the cycle. Taught that he is nothing and has nothing to give. The street's the only way to live. There's no hope in his neighborhood. And all positivity is taught to forbid. Now he chased down dead end. Couldn't call a friend. Muzzle aimed at his heart. He put his hands up. He said, don't shoot. Then his life fell apart. Because guns like us, but we don't want them to. Said he don't want to face it no more. But we ain't got a choice to. What's up, y'all? My name is Coley World. I'm a motivational speaker, spoken word artist, and youth mentor here in Sacramento. And it's a blessing to be here. Shout out to MBK, UC Davis, and D'Angelo, Johan as well for having me here. And that piece is really inspired by the lives of the young kings that I mentor and that I work with. And I mentor them from my perspective. My last name, World. World is my mantra, which means create your own world. It means that we can create the life that we want to live. We don't have to just accept what is given to us. And with that being said, I'm so happy that we're here to talk about trauma and healing, because healing is the first step to be able to create your own world and make your dreams come to a reality. So I'm so happy to be able to start off this conference. Once again, thank you, D'Angelo, MBK, UC Davis. And if you want to get in contact with me, my LinkedIn name is Coley World. My Instagram is This Coley's World. My YouTube is This Coley's World. And if you want to book me, my Gmail is thiscoleysworld@gmail.com. Appreciate y'all for your time. Thank you.
Coley, if we were in person, it'd be loud right now, but use your reaction button for sure. For sure. Mm-hmm. So I want to keep it moving and introduce Andrew Avila from Improve Your Tomorrow. We have lots of good partners in the community, our friends of MBK, and Improve Your Tomorrow is definitely one of them. So go ahead, Andrew. I want to unmute Andrew.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. My name is Andrew Avila. I'm a policy and advocacy manager here at Improve Your Tomorrow. I'm going to start off by saying some words about why this discussion is so important. I'm super happy to be here with all of you, to be a group of people who are passionate about children, and specifically, young boys and men of color. So the pandemic by now, it's nothing new, but that doesn't mean that things have gotten any easier or better, especially for our brothers. This is true in many aspects of the lives of our young men of color, with their family and their social lives, and the way these young brothers perceive themselves right now. Whether they envision their lives 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. So when we talk about young men of color returning to school during an ongoing pandemic, the focus of discussion isn't all about educational performance. It's about emotional health, mental health. An overwhelming amount of stress can even come to affect physical health. As schools begin in-person instruction again, the focus must be placed on the overall well-being of the students. And the only way to do that is by first coming to understand the unique challenges, barriers, the deterrents, and the disparities that student is facing. The students, for purposes of today's discussion, are young men of color. Young men of color have had to grapple with racism, which still lingers, often dissimulated more so than obvious within many of our institutions and social constructs that we have today. I say that to point because racism is a circumstance that has negatively impacted the life outcomes and educational performance of our young colored brothers. We know that Black and Latino boys historically are the lowest scoring groups when it comes to educational performance. These same boys are about to return to school during an ongoing pandemic after being stuck in home for well over a year. Long before COVID and any other pandemic that's ever existed, to be frank, we all know that many of our brothers have been experiencing difficulties inside and outside of school. So it's justifiable to assume that things aren't going to be any easier for them when they return to campus. Remote learning meant that many students haven't been able to interact with other children, a lot of them having to be isolated at home. Consider that isolation, which school children have experienced during this whole pandemic. And then think about young men of color, who are the lowest performing group. If we want our young men of color to succeed in school and for the rest of their educational, career and lives, we need to first understand what these boys and young men have gone through this past year. To protect our brothers from further trauma, from further stress, of which they are already overwhelmed. This is why we're all here, right? To understand our brothers, what they've endured during this pandemic, to identify the challenges, barriers, the deterrents and disparities that have hindered their progress and well-being, so we can begin to dismantle them. This way, our brothers can learn to heal from the trauma that they've endured all their lives and start healing moving forward. That's why our discussion that we're having today is so important. I want to thank my brothers Keepers Sacramento for giving me the opportunity to share with you all today, in addition to all the other panelists, participants, and attendees for being here. I look forward to a very productive conversation and lots of learning.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that so much. In light of that, I want to actually turn it over to Ray Green, the NPK coordinator.
Morning, everybody. So glad to see your beautiful faces and names. I want to thank, first off, the My Brother's Keeper Health strategy team. You know, D'Angelo Mack, who's been the chair of the strategy team, is really phenomenal. But I have to shout out each and every individual. We can just give them some love in the chat. Many of you may not know them, but you will as we continue to move forward in Sacramento and do these wonderful presentations of spaces to learn and heal together. My name is Ray Green. I serve as a program organizer and officer at the Center at Sierra Health Foundation, where we believe in health equity and race equity. And I just wanted to share a little bit about the vision of why. And I want to thank the young brothers who shared the reason why we are actually here today. You know, in 2014, President Obama announced the launching of My Brother's Keeper. And it was really to address some of the root causes, the barriers in policies, procedures, and practices across the nation. You put a call to action, a challenge out there to city elected leaders to really change it. But we knew here in Sacramento that we could not move forward with solutions if we didn't talk and speak to those who are closest to the challenges, which were our youth and our young men of color. So the My Brother's Keeper Sacramento Collaborative is really just committed to improving the educational, health, social, and economic outcomes for local boys and men of color right here in Sacramento. And we do this through bringing system leaders, advocates like yourself, community partners, some that you've heard from today, and you will eventually hear later on, youth serving organizations and young people together to address these root causes in health, education, employment, justice system disparities for young men of color. And we do this through policy advocacy. We do it through system change and support for effective programs. As I get ready to, talk about just a couple of updates, I wanted to just really share that during this pandemic, it has been tough. I love the conversation that we're getting ready to dive into, because our young people do have dreams. Our young people do have ambitions of being successful, of creating their own jobs, of having a healthy family, passing high school, going into college or a career. And they shouldn't have their dreams deferred. And not only did we mention this in the Sacramento Bee, but I wanted to share that their